Let us begin. You are 12 years old now. Act like an adult and give your Hawaii ticket to your cousin. Richard, my father-in-law, dropped this bomb before I could even swallow my first bite of medium-rare steak. We were barely 10 minutes into our mandated Sunday family dinner. The dining room was suffocatingly warm, smelling of roasted garlic and unearned entitlement. Emma, my daughter, froze. The excitement completely drained from her eyes. For 6 months, she had a countdown calendar taped to her bedroom door. Caleb and I had worked grueling hours to afford this. As a trauma surgeon, I traded sleep, missed school plays, and stood on my feet for 14-hour shifts just to buy those non-refundable tickets. Have you ever sat across a beautifully set dining table from the people who call you family, knowing they are secretly waiting for you to bleed? How many times have you swallowed your own boundaries, bit your tongue, and paid the bill just to keep the peace? What happens when the people demanding your unconditional loyalty are the exact same ones quietly robbing you in the dark? Welcome to the Financial Revenge Showrunner. If you are exhausted by toxic relatives who weaponize the word family to drain your bank account, and you want to learn how to fight back with cold, calculated strategy, hit that subscribe button right now. We do not forgive. We audit. Today's case file is titled, "My Father-in-Law Demanded My Daughter's Hawaii Trip. My husband revealed his $2 million AI crypto scam." Richard did not care about my shifts. He just stared at my daughter, his voice dripping with absolute authority, demanding she hand over the ultimate birthday gift because her cousin supposedly needed a break. Diane, my mother-in-law, immediately chimed in, swirling her expensive red wine. She nodded approvingly, telling Emma that giving up the trip would build character. She weaponized family values right there over the mashed potatoes, spinning a fake narrative about the cousin's financial hardship to mask their own greed. They were trying to pressure a 12-year-old child to surrender her boundaries just to maintain their distorted version of control. They expected me to react emotionally. They expected me to argue, to raise my voice, to play the role of the hysterical, defensive daughter-in-law. I did none of that. Screaming is for victims. I reached under the heavy mahogany table and squeezed my daughter's hand, a silent signal for her to stay completely quiet. Then, I placed my silver fork down on my porcelain plate. The metallic clink echoed loudly in the room. I leaned back in my chair, refusing to break eye contact with Richard. I showed absolutely zero emotion. I let the heavy, suffocating silence hang in the air, forcing them to sit in the awkward reality of their own audacity. Historically, this was the exact moment my husband, Caleb, would fold. For over a decade, his parents relied on his passive nature. They banked on his silence. They miscalculated. Caleb did not look at his plate. He did not apologize. Instead, he pushed his heavy wooden chair back so violently it scraped against the hardwood floor. He stood up to his full height, breaking a lifetime of conditioned obedience. "Ava does not need a break," Caleb said, his voice dropping an octave, completely shattering their fake narrative. "Her parents just bought a brand new luxury SUV last Tuesday. Do not lie to my daughter." Richard's face flushed red. He opened his mouth to pivot back to the concept of sharing, attempting to regain control of the room. But Caleb cut him off. The vacation was never the real issue. It was just a smokescreen. "If we are talking about acting like adults," Caleb said, his voice ice-cold and terrifyingly calm, "let us talk about my wife's medical malpractice settlement." The air in the room instantly evaporated. Diane's wine glass stopped swirling. Richard's eyes darted toward the hallway. The words hung in the suffocating air, sharp and unforgiving. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. I watched Richard's face undergo a visceral transformation. The arrogant, patriarchal sneer he wore just moments ago completely vanished, replaced by the hollow, wide-eyed stare of a cornered predator. He blinked. Once, twice, his brain desperately scrambling to construct a firewall against the truth. "I have no idea what you are talking about," Richard stammered, though the sudden tremor in his jaw betrayed him. "The market has been experiencing unprecedented volatility. We are seeing severe adjustments across all major portfolios. It is just standard economic turbulence. Caleb, you do not understand macroeconomics." It was the classic deflecting tactic of a financial parasite. When cornered with a direct question, they will drown you in corporate jargon. They will use phrases like market adjustments and portfolio turbulence to make you feel small, uneducated, and out of your depth. Diane immediately jumped in to reinforce the barricade. Her hand trembled slightly. She forced a tight, patronizing smile. "Oh, Caleb, please," Diane scoffed, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Investments take time to mature. Besides, your father told me that specific account is currently locked by the bank for routine server maintenance. We could not pull a statement right now, even if we wanted to." Locked for routine server maintenance. The lie was so absurd, so fundamentally insulting to our intelligence, that I almost felt embarrassed for her. But banks do not lock multi-million-dollar trust accounts for server maintenance for months on end. They were banking on our ignorance. More importantly, they were banking on the societal conditioning that dictates you must never question your elders about money at the dinner table. When the financial jargon failed, Diane switched to her second weapon, weaponizing my success. "And honestly," Diane continued, shooting a venomous glare in my direction, "why are we even discussing this right now? She is a top-tier trauma surgeon. You two live in a beautiful house. You drive expensive cars. She makes a phenomenal income. It is not like you are desperate for cash to buy groceries. Why are you harassing your father over a piece of paper when your own family is sitting right here?" There it was, the ultimate toxic family defense mechanism. If you are successful, your boundaries no longer apply. If you work grueling 14-hour shifts to build wealth. Toxic relatives view your bank account as community property. They believe your hard work entitles them to a permanent, unearned discount on life. Richard sensed Diane's argument was gaining zero traction. He resorted to the oldest trick in the patriarchal playbook, physical intimidation. He stood up, using every inch of his frame to tower over the table, puffing his chest out to cast a long, dark shadow over his son. "Sit down, Caleb," Richard barked, pointing a thick, accusing finger. "You are ruining Sunday dinner. You are upsetting your mother. I am handling the wealth management. You will get your updated statements when I decide the quarter has officially closed." The end of discussion. He expected Caleb to fold. He expected the booming voice to trigger decades of generational fear. Caleb did not shrink. Caleb did not flinch. He stood his ground, a monument of absolute stoicism. He reached inside the breast pocket of his tailored suit jacket. He pulled out something infinitely more dangerous than a weapon. He pulled out a thick, folded stack of papers. The top page bore the official, embossed logo of a premier federal banking institution. "I do not need you to provide the quarterly statements, Richard," Caleb said, his voice dropping to a low, lethal whisper. I already went to the bank. I sat down with the regional vice president on Thursday morning. We pulled the master ledger. Richard's face drained entirely of blood. Caleb unfolded the document slowly, deliberately letting the crisp sound of the heavy paper echo in the dead silence. You told us the account held $2,100,000, securely locked in a high-yield municipal bond fund, Caleb stated. It is, Richard choked out. It is just transitioning. The balance, Caleb interrupted, his voice slicing through the lie like a scalpel, is $0.00. The account was permanently closed 8 months ago. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of total ruin. The grand illusion was dead. I looked at Diane. Her manicured hands were gripping the edges of the table so tightly her knuckles had turned completely white. You make a phenomenal income, I said, finally breaking my own silence. My voice was perfectly flat. I weaponized Diane's exact words. My income, my brutal shifts, and my success do not grant you legal immunity. Being a doctor does not mean I am running a charity for grand larceny. Richard swallowed hard. He stepped backward, suddenly looking very small, very old, done and very guilty. We can fix this, Richard pleaded. Caleb, son, please, we just needed a bridge loan. We moved the funds to secure a massive opportunity. It is safe. Caleb stepped closer. He looked down at the second page of the dossier. Do not lie to me again, Caleb commanded. The money is not in a bridge loan. On the morning of October 14th, at exactly 9:15, you initiated an international wire transfer. So you moved $2,100,000 to an offshore shell entity registered in the Cayman Islands. Richard stammered. It was a Medicare breakthrough investment. I authorized the transfer for the family portfolio. It was an executive decision. Caleb. Caleb smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the grim, surgical smile of an executioner pulling the lever. You did not authorize anything, Richard, Caleb said. You are not a signatory on that specific account. You never were. The bank would never release $2 million on your word alone. Caleb tilted his head slightly. She authorized it over the phone. The air in the room turned to absolute ice. The anatomy of a high-level financial betrayal is complex. Moving that kind of wealth required mandatory verbal biometric verification. It required my voice, my security phrases, and my explicit recorded consent. There was only one massive problem with Richard's narrative. On the morning of October 14th, at exactly 9:15, I was standing in operating room number 4. I was elbow deep in the shattered thoracic cavity of a severe car crash victim. I spent 14 consecutive hours under the blinding glare of surgical lights. My phone was locked inside a steel locker 3 floors away. I did not make that phone call. I could not have made that phone call. This was no longer a simple case of a father making a bad investment. This was severe, malicious identity theft. Richard saw the realization dawn on our faces, and he panicked. He immediately reverted to the tech bro defense, throwing out meaningless Silicon Valley buzzwords. It is just a smart crypto venture, Richard blurted out. Decentralized finance, a blockchain ledgers. You just lack the vision to understand the technology. He was trying to dress up a felony in a cheap, ill-fitting suit of innovation. But the stolen money was just a symptom. The disease was the total compromise of my professional identity. As a trauma surgeon, My name is attached to a national provider identifier number, a federal DEA registration, and a pristine medical license. By hijacking my identity to commit wire fraud, and Richard had effectively placed a loaded gun to the head of my entire career. Diane attempted her usual tactic of aggressive minimization. Richard just used one of those fun little computer programs, a voice filter. It is just a harmless digital shortcut. It is not a real crime if it stays within the family. She was attempting to shrink a federal felony down to a social media prank. We weaponized their hubris. Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out his smartphone. He tapped the screen twice. "I requested the audio logs from the fraud department," Caleb announced quietly. He set the phone down on the center of the mahogany dining table, right next to the roasted garlic potatoes. He pressed play. "Yes, this is Dr. Lawson. I authorize the immediate release of $2,100,000 to the specified offshore holding account. My security passphrase is Blue Orchid Winter." It was my voice, the pitch, the tone, the slight authoritative rasp. But it lacked soul. The cadence was too perfect. It was an artificial intelligence deepfake voice clone. My mother-in-law gasped, clamping a hand over her mouth. "The bank thought they were speaking to my wife," Caleb said, pausing the recording. His eyes were devoid of mercy. "But the fraud department ran the audio through their spectral analysis software. It flagged as a synthetic digital construct generated by a commercial AI platform." "You thought you were untraceable," Caleb continued. "You forgot one crucial detail, that I hired an independent forensic tech auditor on Friday morning." Caleb slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "The auditor traced the digital footprint of the deepfake generation," Caleb stated. "The synthetic voice was rendered, compiled, and transmitted from the desktop computer sitting in your upstairs study. There is no hacker. There is no mystery. There is only you." The firewall of Richard's arrogance completely collapsed. I leaned forward. I spoke with the icy precision of a surgeon delivering a terminal diagnosis. "Let me explain the law to you, Richard. Under Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 1343, using an electronic communication device to execute a scheme to defraud a financial institution is classified as federal wire fraud. Furthermore, utilizing artificial intelligence to clone a biometric signature constitutes aggravated identity theft. That is a Class C federal felony. The Department of Justice does not grade on a curve for desperate fathers-in-law. The mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines are exceptionally unforgiving." Richard began to hyperventilate. "You cannot do this. Your medical license, the scandal, it will ruin your practice. If you expose this, the medical board will suspend you. We have to keep this quiet to protect you." He was trying to use my own career as a hostage, the final, desperate gambit. But I reached into my purse and pulled out my own phone. "I am already 3 steps ahead of you," I replied coldly. At 6 o'clock this morning, I contacted the Office of the Inspector General. I preemptively froze my national provider identifier number. I locked down my DEA prescribing credentials. I placed a complete, indefinite freeze on my entire professional identity matrix. Richard realized in that exact moment that I had systematically cut off every single avenue of escape, and I had severed the oxygen supply to his scam before he even knew the war had started. "You compromised my identity," I stated, standing up slowly. "You gambled my daughter's future on a rigged casino table. You thought my silence was weakness." I picked up my purse. Caleb stepped to my side. A silent, immovable wall of support. The money you stole is gone, I concluded, but the consequences of your actions are just arriving. You did not just steal my money, I finally spoke, and leaning my weight over the table. You used my face to build the federal government. Richard's chest froze mid-heave. Up until this second, he thought we only knew about the bank transfer. He was wrong. The crypto wallet was never the investment. It was the washing machine. I am not implying anything, Richard. I am stating documented to federal facts. I reached back into the leather portfolio sitting by my feet. I slammed a second, much thicker folder onto the table. The loud smack made Diane flinch so violently her wine glass tipped over, spilling dark red liquid across the pristine white linen like a freshly opened wound. The crypto scam was just a front, I continued. You used my stolen funds to quietly purchase server space, commercial domains, and AI rendering software. You set up a network of fake telemedicine clinics operating out of a shell company registered in Delaware. Richard's eyes darted frantically toward the front door. You did not just clone my voice to bypass the bank, Caleb added. You used the deepfake software to generate a hyper-realistic, interactive avatar of my wife's face. You programmed it to conduct automated video consultations with vulnerable, elderly patients. The sheer depravity of the crime hung over the table, thick and suffocating. You billed Medicare hundreds of thousands of dollars for ghost surgeries that never happened, I stated. You submitted fraudulent claims for expensive diagnostic tests and high-tier prescriptions. You processed all of those federal payouts through the exact same crypto wallet you used to drain my settlement fund. The financial theft was no longer my primary concern. The true horror was the catastrophic danger they had inflicted upon innocent lives. Do you understand what you have done to my patients? I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Elderly people logged on to your fake portals seeking genuine medical help. They poured out their symptoms to a digital puppet wearing my face. Your algorithm dispensed generic medical advice. You delayed life-saving care for human beings just so you could pocket the federal insurance payouts. Richard gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. My medical license, I continued, took 12 years of brutal residency and relentless sacrifice to earn. It is my vow to protect human life, and you put it on the verge of being permanently revoked just to fund your pathetic, failing retirement. We have to keep this quiet, Richard pleaded. We will sign over the house. We will liquidate our retirement accounts. We will pay the money back. Just please, Caleb, do not let them put your father in federal prison. He was attempting to weaponize loyalty. Caleb looked at his father with an expression of absolute disgust. The Lawson family name, Caleb said, his voice completely devoid of warmth, is a worthless, rotting corpse. You destroyed it the second you decided to use my wife as a human shield for your greed. I opened the dossier to the final page. I have already retained the most aggressive federal defense attorney in this state. He specializes in massive healthcare fraud and whistleblower immunity. His explicit mandate is to sever my liability completely and feed the actual perpetrators directly to the Department of Justice. Diane burst into theatrical, heaving sobs. She threw her hands in the air, but she did not look at Caleb. She looked directly at Emma. "Emma, please," Diane wailed, reaching her arms out. Tell your mother to stop. Tell your father to forgive us. Do you want to see your grandma and grandpa locked away in a dark cell?" It was the most vile tactic in the arsenal of a manipulator. When they cannot break the adults, they try to traumatize the children. The stoicism shattered. I did not yell. but I moved with terrifying, immediate speed. I stood up, stepping directly between Diane and my daughter. "Do not ever speak to my daughter again," I commanded. "Emma," I said, my voice instantly softening for my child. "Stand up, take your coat, go out to the driveway and sit in the car. Lock the doors, do not come back inside, no matter what you hear." Emma did not hesitate. The heavy click of the deadbolt shutting behind her was the sound of my only vulnerability leaving the battlefield. Now, there were no hostages left. "I cure diseases," I told Richard. "I do not negotiate with them." Right on cue, the front door began to vibrate. 3 sharp, authoritative, deafening knocks. The authorities had arrived. The sound sliced through the suffocating tension like a tactical blade. Richard gasped. He lunged toward the foyer, throwing his entire body weight against the heavy wooden door, desperately gripping the brass deadbolt as if his sheer physical strength could somehow hold back the crushing weight of the United States justice system. "Do not open it," Richard screamed, while Richard attempted to physically barricade the house. Diane completely lost her mind. She dove across the dining table, shattering her crystal water glass. She was trying to delete her encrypted messaging applications. She was trying to scrub the digital blood off her hands. It was the pathetic soundtrack of a massive criminal conspiracy, violently collapsing inward. I did not move a single muscle. I remained seated. I watched their psychological destruction with the cold observation of a scientist. Caleb walked into the foyer. "Step aside, Richard," Caleb ordered. "You are killing me," Richard sobbed. Caleb reached out, gripped the collar of his father's expensive cashmere sweater, and shoved him violently against the wall. Richard collapsed onto the floor, a broken shell of a patriarch. Caleb turned the brass deadbolt. He pulled the door wide open. The crisp, freezing night air rushed into the house, carrying with it the undeniable reality of consequence. 3 men and 1 woman stepped across the threshold, dark, tactical windbreakers, the yellow lettering FBI and Office of the Inspector General. The stark visual contrast was breathtaking. On one side, the messy remnants of a wealthy family dinner. On the other, the absolute, terrifying precision of federal law enforcement. "Richard Lawson?" the lead agent asked. A 5th person stepped through the doorway, my attorney. He walked directly into the dining room and stood beside my chair, a silent, impenetrable shield. My client is exercising her right to complete silence under my counsel," my attorney stated. "You are currently holding her preemptive federal QI-TAM whistleblower immunity agreement. My client is the protected informant who initiated this entire raid. She is entirely insulated from your warrants." The liability shifted instantly and permanently. I was no longer a suspect. I was the architect of their destruction. "Diane Lawson!" a second agent shouted. Diane was still clutching her smartphone. "Put the device down on the table immediately," the agent commanded. "Step away from the device, now." The agent closed the distance in 3 rapid strides. He pried the unlocked smartphone directly out of her manicured fingers and dropped it into a specialized signal-blocking Faraday bag. "Attempting to destroy digital evidence is a standalone felony, ma'am. We will add it to the indictment." Diane let out a guttural shriek and collapsed into her chair. The lead agent turned back to Richard. He unfolded papers with methodical precision. "Richard Lawson, I am serving you with a federal subpoena for the immediate surrender of all financial ledgers, digital storage drives, and cryptocurrency hardware wallets. Furthermore, I am executing a federal search warrant pertaining to aggravated identity theft, wire fraud, and the defrauding of the United States Medicare system. Richard stared blankly at the paper. All of his brilliant, untouchable crimes were now neatly categorized into federal felonies. Caleb stood in the doorway, watching his parents being systematically stripped of their power and their dignity. He did not shed a single tear. He had finally amputated a gangrenous limb. "Please," Diane sobbed, as the agent dropped her silver laptop into an evidence bag. "Caleb, please listen to me. We will sell the house. We will pay you back every single dime. Just tell them to stop." I let a slow, terrifyingly calm smile touch the corners of my mouth. "You cannot sell what the federal government has already seized. Diane." Richard dragged himself up from the floor. "The lake house in upstate New York. It is worth $800,000. I will sign the deed over to the government right now. Just let us handle this as a civil matter." The lead agent did not even look up from his clipboard. He pointed toward my attorney. "Under the provisions of federal asset forfeiture laws," my attorney stated. "The United States Department of Justice filed an ex parte motion at 9 o'clock this morning. A federal judge signed the order at noon." I leaned forward, tapping my index finger on the page. "Read the second paragraph. Richard." Richard read the words aloud, his voice breaking. "A complete, indefinite freeze on all domestic bank accounts, investment portfolios, retirement funds, and real estate holdings deeded to Richard and Diane Lawson." The trap was not just closed. It was welded shut. "You do not own a lake house anymore," I explained, my voice carrying the sterile precision of a coroner. "You do not own this suburban estate. You do not own your vehicles. You do not even own the cash currently sitting in your leather wallet. The government owns it all. It is locked down pending a massive federal criminal trial." Richard's knees buckled. "The crypto," Richard whispered. He thought the $2,100,000 he stole was safely hidden behind blockchain encryption. "The crypto is offshore. The federal court cannot touch a decentralized ledger." Caleb stepped forward, obliterating his father's final shred of hope. "Crypto is only decentralized until you try to cash it out. Richard, you moved the funds through a decentralized mixer. But you eventually parked the entire stolen balance in a centralized exchange based in the Bahamas to earn yield." Caleb pulled a printed email from his pocket. "Our forensic accountant traced the digital transaction hash. My attorney drafted a federal subpoena. The Department of Justice served that subpoena to the exchange executives yesterday afternoon. To comply with international anti-money laundering regulations, the exchange immediately froze your entire wallet. They clawed back the funds. Every single digital coin is now sitting in a secure holding account controlled by the United States Treasury." The silence that followed was absolute. They had nothing. They were stripped bare. The financial armor they had used to bully, manipulate, and gaslight our family for over a decade was completely annihilated. Diane let out a low, agonizing wail. She looked at me, her eyes burning with hatred. "You planned this," Diane hissed. "You wanted to destroy us. You want to see us homeless. You are a monster." I did not flinch. "I did not force you to clone my voice," I replied evenly. "I did not force you to bill Medicare for fake surgeries. I did not force you to steal from my patients. You dug your own grave. I merely provided the headstone." The lead agent stepped into the center of the room. "Richard Lawson, Diane Lawson," the agent barked. "I need you to retrieve your United States passports immediately. You are both considered severe flight risks. You will be surrendering your travel documents right now, and you will be accompanying us to the federal field office for processing. They lost their stolen millions. They lost their luxury home. They lost their freedom, most importantly. As Caleb turned his back on them and walked toward the front door without saying a single word of goodbye, they realized they had permanently lost their son. A thief's tears are never for the victim. They only cry because they are finally experiencing the crushing weight of their own consequences. Exactly 3 weeks and 4 days after the federal raid, a flight attendant leaned over the wide leather armrest of my first-class seat. Champagne? Dr. Lawson? I took the glass. I looked out the massive oval window. We were cruising at 36,000 feet, heading toward Maui, Hawaii. The media caught wind of the deepfake doctoring within 48 hours. My reputation, my medical license, and my entire life's work hung in a terrifying balance. And the Federal Medical Board immediately launched an exhaustive audit of my career. I did not panic. I provided the data. The board members did not just exonerate me, they completely restored my pristine record. The hospital administration issued a public statement, transforming me into a hero who protected vulnerable patients from a catastrophic cybercrime. But the true culmination was the absolute financial execution. Under the federal Qui Tam statutes, a private citizen who exposes massive fraud against the United States government is legally entitled to a substantial percentage of the recovered funds. Richard and Diane stole $2,100,000 from my settlement account. But they defrauded Medicare out of nearly $4 million. The Department of Justice moved with terrifying speed. They liquidated the offshore accounts. They seized the lake house. They drained the retirement portfolios. On Tuesday morning, a secure wire transfer hit my newly established trust account. The federal government returned every single penny of my stolen medical settlement. Then, they deposited my legal whistleblower reward, $1,400,000, completely tax-free. Richard and Diane unintentionally made me a multi-millionaire. Caleb sat next to me in seat 1B. He was holding Emma's hand. He found peace in one fact. When the ultimate test arrived, he did not protect his abusers. He protected his wife. He protected his daughter. We secured a permanent, ironclad restraining order. Richard is now being represented by a vastly overworked public defender. His expensive private attorneys dropped him the second his accounts were frozen. Diane is currently sitting in a sterile county holding cell. They are both facing a mandatory minimum of 15 years in federal prison. They are legally, permanently barred from ever contacting my daughter again. I took a slow sip of the cold champagne. The crisp bubbles burned pleasantly against my throat. I looked over at Emma, who was eagerly studying a glossy map of the Hawaiian resort, completely untouched by the darkness we left behind. Living well is not just the best revenge. It is the only revenge that actually pays dividends. When toxic people try to use your empathy as a weapon, you do not cry. You do not scream. You do not negotiate with terrorists who share your last name. You build an absolute fortress of boundaries. You document every single lie, and you let the crushing weight of reality do the heavy lifting for you. You let them dig their own graves in the dark. Then, you simply forward the GPS coordinates to the federal authorities. Thank you for joining the Financial Revenge Showrunner. If you found profound satisfaction in this absolute financial destruction, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel right now. Share your own survival stories in the comments below. Until next time, keep your boundaries ironclad and keep your bank statements locked.